Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Friday, December 18th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Big Ten championship game against Northwestern is tomorrow. The college football playoff selection show is in 2 days, and the game against Michigan is in 344 days. The next 48 hours will determine whether Ohio State has a chance to reach most of its goals for the season. Saturday, they will try to win an unprecedented fourth straight outright Big Ten championship. And then Sunday at noon, they'll find out if they will get the opportunity to play for a national title in the college football playoff. There are still a lot of what ifs left to be resolved, which makes this the perfect time to have on Phil Steele, the guy whose name is pretty much synonymous with college football predictions. Phil, thank you for joining us this morning.
Hey, a real pleasure, Tom.
So, Phil, there are three games really on Saturday that Ohio State fans are going to be probably watching pretty nervously all day. The Big Ten at noon, the ACC at 4, the SEC title game at 8. And depending on how those games fall, Sunday could be a nice, relaxed morning for Buckeye fans who know their team is in. Another nerve-wracking wait for noon until they find out if the team's on the, while they wait to see if their team's on the bubble again, or they could be out entirely if Ohio State loses on Saturday. So let's start with noon, the Saturday Big Ten championship game. Ohio State favored by 20.5 points. Is there any reason in your mind for concern for Buckeye fans heading into this game?
Well, they're playing Northwestern. Northwestern's a team that's got an excellent defense, and they also have an improved offense this year. In fact, Northwestern was my number 2 most improved team in the country in the magazine coming in, and they've lived up to that. If not for the Michigan State game, they'd be unbeaten, and they played the underdog card extremely well. Remember the Wisconsin game where I believe Joey Galloway called them a bunch of Reese Davises, and they really played on that and sort of dominated Wisconsin in that game, winning at 17-7. They beat Iowa this year, which is a very good Iowa team. So Northwestern is a very dangerous team. I mean, Ohio State has a talent edge. I picked Ohio State number 1 in my magazine. But, yeah, there's reasons to worry about the game because Northwestern is a solid team, and they're playing the underdog card extremely well.
Where do your rankings, your power metrics have that game sort of shaken out?
I've got Ohio State winning the game probably by about 14 to 17 points. I think the Buckeyes are, if you look at the two teams defensively, I'm going to give the edge to Northwestern. They've got 9 starters back from a defense. They gave up just 325 yards per game last year, holding opponents to 68 yards below their season average. Meanwhile, Ohio State's defense actually allowing opponents 3 yards above their season average. So I'm going to give the edge defensively to Northwestern, but large edges on offense go to Ohio State. I'll take Justin Fields at quarterback all day. They have the edge on the offensive line. They, of course, have the edge at wide receiver with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. And I'm going to give the edge at running back as well. So this is a much more explosive Ohio State team, averaging about 200 yards per game more than Northwestern. And Ohio State deserves to be favorite. I think they win the game probably by about something like 14 to 17 points.
And if they do handle business on Saturday at noon, then everyone in the state of Ohio is going to flip over to that ACC championship game at 4 o'clock, where the best result for Ohio State probably is a Notre Dame win. But even with Clemson missing Trevor Lawrence and a few key defensive players, the first time those teams met, it still went to overtime in South Bend last month. What do you see as the keys to that game if Notre Dame is going to win it?
Notre Dame being able to run the football. Now, we saw them able to run the football in the first matchup. They averaged 209 yards on the ground, 5.1 yards per carry. But as you mentioned, Clemson was missing some key players, the quarterback of the defense and Skalski, 2 other starters on the defensive side. But if Notre Dame's able to run the football again, they've got an outstanding quarterback in Ian Book, and they've got the defense as well. Notre Dame's very good on defense, holding opponents to 103 yards per game below their season average. So to me, the key of the game is, can Notre Dame run the football like they did in game 1?
Do you think they'll be able to run the ball like they did in game 1? How do you see that one shaking out?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good game, and I think it's going to be closer than Vegas has it at 10.5 right now. I thought the line would be something around Clemson by 7. And, a lot of folks are playing on, well, Clemson's playing with revenge, but Notre Dame's also got to be playing that disrespect card. I mean, their first win is basically being discounted because Trevor Lawrence and 3 starters weren't there. And, everybody expects Clemson to win and win comfortably this time, but Notre Dame's going to be playing that respect card all week, and they've got the defense, they've got the run game, and they've got the quarterback. They really are a complete team. I like the Irish to take this one right down to the wire, and much like the first one, wouldn't surprise me if it even goes overtime.
Yeah, and a close game there is probably not super fantastic news for Ohio State. That might keep both teams in, especially if Clemson ends up winning that one. And then that pushes it to the nightcap, which is the SEC title game. Ohio State fans are going to be in the rather unusual position of kind of holding their nose and saying "Roll Tide." Florida's coming in off that shocking loss to LSU last weekend. The Tide a 17-point favorite. I really don't see the Gators being able to run the ball very much, and it sure seems like the Tide has an opportunity to really run it all over Florida. I mean, is there a path to victory for the Gators?
Turnovers. Horrific game by Mac Jones. Referees calls going the wrong way. This is a very good Alabama team. I think Alabama's the best team in the country right now. As you touched on, they can run the football. They've got Najee Harris, perhaps the best, if not one of the best running backs in the country. They've got the best wide receiver in the country, maybe, in Devontae Smith. They've got Mac Jones, a quarterback, a guy who's hitting 76% with a 37-3 ratio. You look at Bama's defense the last 5 games, they're giving up about 240 yards per game, which is unheard of in this era of offensive football. And as you touched on, Florida, since the middle of last year, hasn't even really tried to run the football. They're just a passing team. And I don't think that sets up very well against a team like Alabama that can get after the quarterback. Heck, they had 8 sacks last week against Arkansas, 5 against LSU. They're really rounding into the form as a pass rushing. And on the flip side of the coin, Florida's defense has not been overwhelming this year, giving up almost 400 yards per game. And I think Alabama has its way with them. So I'm not overreacting to last week's game. I like Bama by 3 touchdowns prior to last week's game. But after last week's game, probably even a little bit more. I like the Tide to win this one and win it comfortably. And I don't think Florida really has a great opportunity here.
Well, and this is the question that I think is keeping Ohio State fans up at night right now. Is there a scenario where the Buckeyes win Saturday night and still don't get into the playoff? I think with Florida dropping only 1 spot in the college football playoff rankings, you don't have to squint super hard to see the committee thinking that maybe they would squeeze them back in there if they do somehow pull off that upset against Alabama. Is that a scenario where the Buckeyes could get left out even with a win on Saturday, or is there a scenario in your mind?
I don't see it. I do not see an undefeated Big Ten champ getting left out. About the only way it could happen would be this. Ohio State barely gets past Northwestern. Wins the game on a late score and wins it by 1, 2, or 3 points. And Florida just dominates Alabama from start to finish. And then I think Florida would have that opportunity. The odds of those two things happening are very, very slim, about 1%. So I think if you're an Ohio State fan, you have to be pretty comfortable. If Ohio State beats Northwestern, I really feel they'll be in the playoff.
Well, and if they do make it to the playoff, is there one of those playoff teams, of the teams that are kind of getting bandied about right now? Let's just take the top 4, the current top 4, for example. Is there one of those potential teams who you see as a particularly good matchup for Ohio State, someone that you think they'd have a pretty good chance to beat?
Clemson and Notre Dame. I rate all those 3 teams right in the same area, and I think if Ohio State starts playing better on defense, which we need to see that happen. If that's the case, I think Ohio State's got the offensive edge over Notre Dame. I think the defenses are pretty close with Clemson. I think those teams are all right in the same mix. I do think right now, the way they're playing, Alabama really has shown no flaw. They've got perhaps the best offensive line in the country. They've got a Heisman Trophy candidate at quarterback, perhaps the best running back in the country, perhaps the best wide receiver, and a defense that's playing lights out. Now, things can change. We'll see what happens, but right now I would favor Alabama over those other 3, and I'd put the other 3 right in the hat. So I think Ohio State, just like the game against Clemson last year, I felt Ohio State outplayed Clemson in that game, clearly deserved to win the game, but somehow at the end of the game they didn't win. I think all 3, whether they're playing Notre Dame or Clemson, it'd be a great matchup.
Well, last year it seemed like the goal in the teams getting into the college football playoff was who's going to be the team that gets Oklahoma in the semifinal, because 1, 2, and 3 were also all pretty close, and 4 there was kind of a drop off. This year, maybe it's the drop off is between 1 and 2. I mean, how important is that for Ohio State to look good enough to get that number 3 spot and avoid the Tide in the semifinals?
I think it'd be pretty important, and the good thing is, what happened last is usually on your mind the most. So either Notre Dame or Clemson's going to have a loss after this Saturday's game. And I could see Ohio State jumping them and getting into that number 3 spot no matter. And if Clemson lost, they're probably out of the playoffs altogether. So I think the chances are very good that Ohio State gets out of the number 4 slot and into the 2 or 3 spot, giving them a little bit more time to get ready for that Alabama team. It's just looking so good right now.
So if Clemson does lose and fall out of that top 4, who do you see sliding into that last spot? Is that Texas A&M if they have a big win over Tennessee? Is it Iowa State if they beat Oklahoma this weekend? Who do you see potentially sliding into that 4th spot and facing Alabama in the semifinal if Clemson does lose again?
I think if they play up to their talent level this weekend, it would be Texas A&M, because really, if you watch football and you watch Texas A&M, throughout their first 2 games of the season, since then, this is a team that can run the football. They've got Isaiah Spiller, Aeneas Smith, Crown over in the backfield. Isaiah Spiller, one of the most electrifying running backs out there. They've got a veteran quarterback in Kellen Mond who's got an 18-2 ratio. They've got the tight end Jalen Weidemeyer, and they've also got a very young receiving core that's getting older by the week. And their offensive line is actually one of the top 3 offensive lines in the country. And defensively, A&M is actually holding opponents to 88 yards below their season average. They're tough to run the ball on, only giving up about 100 yards per game on the ground, and they're tough to throw the ball on. So they really are a complete team, and I think capable of being a playoff team and standing with the big boys. Now, they're going to need an impressive win over Tennessee, because if they don't get that, then I think all of a sudden there's a lot of doubt left in the mind. But in my mind, I would put Texas A&M as the number 4 team over a 2-loss Clemson.
And right now, just looking ahead a couple weeks, is Alabama the team you think is most likely to win it all this year?
They are, but things change. People's perceptions change. Look at the perception of Florida against Alabama. That's going to be a shootout, and then they lose to LSU, and everybody now has made Alabama a huge favorite in that game. So perceptions can change. Teams can change. Alabama's defense was not good against Ole Miss in week 3. They've gotten a lot better each week. We'll see how they do against Florida. At this point, I would make Alabama the clear-cut favorite to win it all, but like I said, I picked Ohio State to win it in the magazine, so I'm sort of rooting for the Buckeyes this year.
Well, whenever anyone hears the name Phil Steele, I'm sure they immediately think of the magazine, but you've also got a website that is absolutely loaded with great information. Let people know about that and what they can find there.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tom. Yeah, the website is philsteele.com. That's STEELE.com. And when you go there, check out this morning. I'll have my Phil Steele Plus tour with selections. You get free plays up there. The free plays are 7 and 2 the last 2 weeks, and it's absolutely free on a YouTube video. So go to philsteele.com for that. You can follow me on Twitter. It is at PhilSteele042. That's at PhilSteele042. And of course, we have the Phil Steele Plus website, which gives you all the information you need at your fingertips at a very low cost. But it's just, all that information's right there at PhilSteele, STEELE.com.
Well, Phil, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning. When looked ahead at this weekend, it was like, who could I have on to preview? Aha! I've got to have Phil Steele on. So we appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much.
Hey, a real pleasure, Tom. Great talking football with you this morning.
All right, Phil, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time to let our listeners know what to expect this weekend. Also, in addition to checking out philsteele.com, make sure you check out buckeyescoop.com. We just launched a brand new website yesterday. There's a ton of great new features, great new functionality, and our forums are in a totally new level right now. Really a busy time and exciting time at buckeyescoop.com between the new site, the college football playoff selection show coming up in 2 days, the Big Ten championship game coming up in 1 day. Lots of great stuff coming on. And guess what? The college football playoff semifinals are less than 2 weeks away. It is crazy, but the big New Year's Day games are already almost here. This makes that the perfect time to check out buckeyescoop.com, become a member. You can ask for that for Christmas, give that as a gift for Christmas. You can get a nice annual membership. And then this time next year, when someone asks what you want for Christmas, just ask them to renew that buckeyescoop.com membership. And also make sure you check out all of our great podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify. And now on that new site, there is a podcast spot on the menu on the left-hand side. You can listen to them all right there at buckeyescoop.com if that's easier for you. And that is a free feature whether you're a member or not. So make sure you check out buckeyescoop.com for all of that. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the football, enjoy the selection show, and we will talk to you Monday.